The Bluebird on Harbor Street. Eleanor Nell Hartley stood in the middle of a house that was no longer hers, listening to how loud silence could be. 32 years of marriage had been packed into cardboard boxes, and the removal van had pulled away an hour ago. The rooms echoed. On the wall, pale rectangles marked where the pictures used to hang. Their wedding, Katie's christening, holidays that now belonged to someone else's memory. She was 58 years old, and she had no idea who she was anymore. Her phone buzzed. Her daughter, again.
Mom, are you still at the house? You shouldn't be there on your own. Come and stay with us. I mean it.
I'm all right, love. I'm just saying goodbye to it.
It's just a house.
But it wasn't just a house. It was the last set of walls that had held the shape of the woman she used to be. And now even those were gone. For 32 years, Eleanor had been the wife of Richard Hartley. She had ironed his shirts before interviews that became promotions. She had hosted the dinners, remembered the birthdays of people she barely liked, and moved house 4 times so his career could climb. She had folded her own dreams up small and put them in a drawer, telling herself there would be time later. Then, 8 months ago, Richard had sat her down at the kitchen table, with the particular calm of a man who had already decided everything, and told her he had met someone, younger, that he felt he had more living to do. As if the living she had done for him had not counted at all. The divorce had been tidy and humiliating. He kept the friends and the golf club. She got a modest settlement and a silence so complete it rang in her ears. Everyone kept telling her how well she was coping. Nobody asked her what she actually wanted, least of all herself. She had forgotten how to want things. That, she thought, might be the saddest part of all. That night, in the spare room of a rented flat that smelled of other people's lives, Nell couldn't sleep. She opened the one box she hadn't been able to face, the box of herself. Beneath old letters, she found a photograph, curled at the corners. A girl of 20, salt in her hair, laughing on a harbor wall, holding an ice cream, the sea flashing silver behind her. On the back, in her own young hand, Port Marin, the best summer of my life. She had gone there every childhood summer. She had once told Richard on their honeymoon that one day she would live by that harbor and open a little tea room where everyone was welcome. He had laughed and called it a lovely idea, in the voice people use for ideas they have no intention of taking seriously. She had never mentioned it again. Now at 2 a.m, alone, Nell looked at that laughing girl for a long time, and something in her chest, something that had been asleep for decades, opened one eye. She meant to forget it by morning. Foolishness, she told herself, briskly making tea, a grieving woman clutching at a childhood daydream. But the idea would not be forgotten. It followed her around the flat all week like a stray cat. And on Thursday, unable to help herself, she typed 3 words into her laptop: Port Marin property. There on the second page was a listing so unlikely it made her laugh out loud. A former cafe, Harbor Street, in need of full renovation. Priced low, desperately, suspiciously low. And a photograph, a shuttered shop front with peeling blue paint and a rusted sign she could just make out, the Bluebird. Nell sat very still. She thought of the drawer where she had folded up her dreams. She thought of Richard's laugh. She thought of the pale squares on the wall where her whole life used to hang. Then, before the sensible part of her could object, she picked up the phone and booked a viewing. The drive took 4 hours and 30 years. When Nell crested the last hill and the sea opened up below her, gray and enormous and glittering, she had to pull over because her eyes had blurred. Port Marin was smaller than she remembered and more beautiful. Fishing boats nodded in the stone harbor. Gulls wheeled and complained. and curving along the water was Harbor Street, a row of little shops in faded pastels, salt-worn and stubborn and alive. She walked its cobbles slowly, coat wrapped tight against the wind, and it was as though the years fell away with every step. There was the harbor wall where the laughing girl had sat. There was the lighthouse on the point. And there, mid-terrace, was the Bluebird, sadder than its photograph, its window boarded, its blue paint blistered, its sign hanging by one rusted bracket. It should have looked like a wreck. Instead, absurdly, it looked like home. The estate agent was late and unenthusiastic. He rattled the stiff lock and shoved the door, and it croned open onto dust and shadow.
I'll be honest with you, it needs everything. Roof, wiring, damp. Most buyers take one look and run. Between us, the whole street's on borrowed time anyway.
Nell barely heard him. She stepped inside and the years of grime could not hide it. The good bones, the wide window that would catch the morning, the little tiled counter, the crooked staircase to the flat above. Weak light fell through the boards in long gold bars. She could see it. That was the terrifying thing. She could see the robin's egg walls, the mismatched chairs, the flowers, the steamed-up glass, the people. She could see it so clearly it took her breath.
Hello, old girl. Look at the state of us both.
Upstairs in the little flat, one small window looked out over the whole harbor. Nell stood at it a long time, and for the first time in 8 months, she did not feel like a ghost. That evening, she sat in a chip shop with her hands around a mug of tea and did the sums until they frightened her. The price was low, but the repairs would swallow most of what Richard's leaving had left her. There was no safety net. If it failed, she would have nothing, and she would have made a fool of herself in front of everyone who had warned her. Every sensible voice she owned told her to go home, but she had spent 32 years being sensible, and it had left her standing in an empty house with pale squares on the wall. She thought of the laughing girl. She thought of the drawer. She thought, if not now, at 58 with nothing left to lose but her fear, then when? In the morning, hands shaking so hard she could barely hold the pen, Eleanor Nell Hartley bought the Bluebird. Then she sat in her car and laughed and cried at the same time, terrified and for the first time in years, gloriously, dangerously alive. Katie's reaction arrived within the hour. By video call, her face a mask of alarm.
You bought a what? A derelict cafe? In a town 4 hours away? Mum, this is a breakdown. This is grief talking. Please tell me you can get your money back.
I don't want my money back, love.
You've never run a business in your life. You don't know anyone there. What if it goes wrong? What if you get ill, or lonely, or...
Then it'll be my mistake to make. My own. Do you know how long it's been since I had one of those?
There was a silence. On the screen, her daughter looked suddenly very young and very scared, and Nell understood. Katie had spent her whole life with a mother who was a fixed point, endlessly reliable, endlessly there. A mother who leapt was a frightening thing.
I'm not asking you to understand yet. I'm just asking you to trust that I'm not finished.
Katie hung up, unconvinced. Nell put down the phone and did not change her mind. She moved into the little flat above the Bluebird with 2 suitcases and a camp bed, and on her first gray morning she was woken by the most extraordinary racket of a woman singing to her flowers. Down on the cobbles, a tiny elderly lady with a cloud of white curls was arranging buckets of blooms outside the shop 2 doors down, chatting to them like old friends.
Well now, so it's true. Someone's mad enough to take on the Bluebird. Come down here, love, and let me look at you.
Nell came down and was immediately handed a bunch of daffodils and inspected like a prize marrow.
80 years I've watched people arrive in this town. The ones who last have a certain look, frightened to death and doing it anyway.
Beat softer.
You've got the look.
I've no idea what I'm doing.
Course you don't. That's how you know it matters. I'm Winnie. Anything you need, I'm 2 doors down. Now, that damp of yours wants seeing to before you do a thing, and I know exactly the man.
The man in question was not pleased to be volunteered. Nell found him in a boatyard at the end of the harbor, a big gray-haired figure planing a curl of timber from a half-built hull, sawdust in the air like gold.
Mr. Rourke, Winnie sent me. I've bought the Bluebird, and apparently you're the only one who can save it.
Winnie says a lot of things.
A pause, he glanced at her, then at the street.
That place has beaten better than you.
How reassuring. Will you look at it or not?
Something flickered across his withered face. Surprise, maybe, at the spine under the nerves. He set down his plane, wiped his hands on a rag, and studied her for a long moment with deep-set brown eyes that seemed to see more than she'd offered.
I'll look. I'm not promising it's worth saving.
As they walked back along the harbor, Nell noticed a photograph pinned in his workshop window. A laughing woman on a boat. She didn't ask. Some griefs you recognize in a stranger without a single word. Sam walked the Bluebird in silence, tapping walls, frowning at the ceiling, disappearing into the cellar and coming back grim. When he finally spoke, he did not soften it.
Roof's going. Wiring's a fire waiting to happen. There's damp in the back wall I want ripping out. Whoever sold you this saw you coming.
Nell felt the floor tilt. She had known, and hearing it aloud was still like cold water.
How much?
He told her. It was most of what she had. The silence stretched. She could feel the sensible voices rising, the ones that sounded like Richard, like Katie, like every year she'd spent being careful. Sam watched her, not unkindly, waiting for her to crumble the way people did.
Then we'd best not waste money on mistakes. When can you start?
For the first time, the corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but the ghost of respect.
Monday, wear old clothes. You'll be working too. I don't carry passengers.
Wouldn't dream of being one.
And so, at 58, in borrowed overalls, Eleanor Nell Hartley learned to strip wallpaper, sand floors, and carry more than she thought her arms could hold. She was slow and she was clumsy, and by the end of each day, she ached in muscles she'd forgotten she owned. She had never been happier. There was something clean about the work, the honest exhaustion, the visible progress, the way a scrubbed floorboard could feel like a small victory over the whole gray year. Sam worked beside her, saying little, but she noticed he no longer told her the place couldn't be saved. One evening, sitting on an upturned crate, sharing a flask of tea as the light went pink over the harbor, he nodded at the room.
Good bones, this place. Just needed someone to believe it.
Maybe that's all any of us need?
He didn't answer, but he didn't look away either. And when he'd gone home, Nell stood alone in her half-mended cafe, hands raw and heart full, and thought, I did this. Nobody did this for me. I did this. Not every day was daffodils and fresh paint. Some nights when the town was asleep and the cafe stood silent below her, Nell sat at the little table in the flat with the ledger open and let herself be afraid of the numbers. The renovation had swallowed nearly everything. What savings remained would last a few careful months and not a penny more. If the cafe didn't find its feet by summer, there would be no rescue. No Richard, no safety net. Only a for sale sign and a long, humiliating drive back to the life she had fled. She did the sums 3 times, hoping they'd be kinder on the third pass. They were not.
You could still stop, sell up, go somewhere sensible and small.
But even as she said it, she knew she wouldn't. She had been sensible and small. It had very nearly cost her her whole self. A soft tap at the door, Winnie, who never seemed to sleep, in a quilted dressing gown, holding 2 glasses and a bottle of elderflower.
Saw your light. You've got the ledger face. My Bert used to get it too.
Pouring.
Every soul on this street started out staring at figures that wouldn't add up, love. The ones who made it weren't the ones with the most money. They were the ones who held their nerve 1 week longer than the fear did.
And if I can't?
Then you'll have failed at something that mattered, instead of succeeding at being invisible. I know which I'd raise a glass to.
She lifted it.
Hold your nerve, Eleanor. Just 1 week longer. It's always just 1 week longer.
As the cafe took shape, Nell realized she couldn't run it alone. She pinned a handwritten card in the window. Help wanted. Kindness essential. Experience optional. The only person who answered was a young woman named Chloe, who arrived 20 minutes late with a 4-year-old on her hip and an apology already on her lips.
Sorry, the childminder fell through. I know it looks bad. I'll go.
You'll do no such thing. Sit down. Who's this handsome fellow?
The little boy was Max. Chloe was 26, raising him alone in a damp flat, on Kara's hours and pride. She had left school early, been told she wasn't clever, and had believed it. She twisted her hands as she talked, and never once said she was good at anything. Nell recognized it instantly. A woman folding herself up small so no one could accuse her of taking up space. She had been that woman for 32 years.
Can you carry a tray, learn a till, and be kind to lonely people?
I think so.
Then you're hired, and Max can have the corner table and all the biscuits he can eat.
Spring came to Port Marin, and it came to the Bluebird too. Daffodils pushed up along the harbor wall. The scaffolding came down. The new sign went up, a hand-painted bluebird, wings open, that Sam had carved himself and pretended was nothing. Inside, the transformation was complete. Robin's egg walls, mismatched vintage chairs, a glass dome over Winnie's flowers, cakes on cake stands, sunlight pouring through clean glass. It smelled of fresh paint and warm scones. On the last evening before opening, the little crew stood back and looked at what they'd made. Nell, Sam, Winnie, and Chloe with Max asleep on her shoulder.
Well, it'll do.
Then cracking.
Oh, it's lovely, Nell. It's the loveliest thing this street's seen in 20 years.
It was all of you.
Sam said nothing, but he'd brought a little potted bluebell for the counter and set it down without a word. And that said everything. Nell looked at the 4 of them and at the cafe that had grown out of the wreck of her old life, and understood that she had not just rebuilt a building, she had rebuilt herself. The morning of the opening, a silver car that did not belong on Harbor Street purred to a stop outside. A tan man in an expensive suit unfolded himself from it, took one look at the freshly painted Bluebird, and smiled the way a wolf smiles at a lamb it hasn't decided to eat yet.
Mrs. Hartley, Vincent Cole, Cole Coastal Developments, what a charming little project. Truly, you've quite the eye.
Thank you. We open in an hour, Mr. Cole, so...
Which is why I came early. I'll be direct because I admire directness in a woman. I'm assembling this entire street. Beautiful luxury apartments, sea views, the future. I'm prepared to buy the Bluebird from you today for rather more than you paid.
He named a figure. It was indeed more than she'd paid. For one dizzy second, the sensible voices roared.
It's not for sale!
Everyone has a price, Mrs. Hartley, and sentiment is an expensive hobby at your stage of life. I'll leave my card. You'll come round.
He left the card on the gleaming counter like a coin left for a beggar. Nell took Cole's card next door to Arthur Penhale's hardware shop and found the old man sitting among his dim shelves of nails and string like a captain going down with a very tidy ship.
Aye, he's been at all of us for a year, bought the corner already, the chandler's selling. He waves his money and he waits. He's patient, that one. waits for folk to get old, or tired, or frightened.
And are people? Selling?
What's to stop them? Trade's hard. Half the town thinks luxury flats and a nice cafe for the tourists is progress.
A catch in his voice.
My father had this shop, his father before him. But I'm 71, Nell, and I'm tired, and there's no one coming after me.
Nell looked around the little shop, the ledger, the brass scales, the decades of a family's whole life, and felt something harden and clarify inside her. She had spent 32 years letting other people decide what her life was worth. She was not about to watch a man in a silver suit do the same to an entire street.
Don't sell yet, Arthur. Please, give me a little time.
The Bluebird opened its doors, and for a long, agonizing hour, almost no one came. Nell stood behind her gleaming counter, watching the scones cool and her nerve fail. Chloe hovered, apron pressed, trying not to look as anxious as she felt. Every empty minute whispered that Katie had been right, that Cole had been right, that a foolish woman had bought a dream she couldn't fill.
They'll come. They just need a reason.
What if they don't?
Nell had no answer. She looked out at the empty cobbles and felt the cold creep of the old fear, the one that said she was too old, too late, too foolish. And then the bell above the door jangled, and it was Winnie, marching in with a face like a general, followed by 3 of her equally elderly friends.
Right. Best cream tea in Port Marin, I've been telling everyone. 4 teas, 4 scones, and don't skimp on the jam, we're not shy.
It was a small thing, 4 old women and a mountain of scones, but it broke the spell. Winnie, it turned out, was a one-woman weather system. By the end of that first week, half of Port Marin had been told, firmly, that they were to try the new place on Harbor Street, and that the woman who ran it had a kind ear and never rushed you out. That last part mattered more than the scones, because the Bluebird became, almost by accident, the warm heart the town had been missing. The widower, who had no one to talk to, lingered over his tea, and Nell always found a moment for him. The young moms came in out of the rain and were made welcome, prams and all. The lonely and the grieving and the simply tired found a corner and a pot of tea and a woman who looked them in the eye.
You know what I've learned? Everybody's carrying something. Everybody. And most of the time, all they want is for one person to notice.
You noticed me?
You were worth noticing.
And Chloe, who had been told for 26 years that she wasn't much, turned away so the customers wouldn't see her cry. There was an hour, most afternoons, that Nell came to think of as a lonely hour. That gray stretch after lunch when the busy folk had gone, and the cafe filled instead with people who had nowhere in particular to be. She learned their names and their sorrows. There was Mr. Tregarth, a widower of 81, who nursed a single pot of tea for 2 hours, because his flat was too quiet to bear. There was a young man of the boats who never quite met anyone's eye. There were the newly retired, unmoored, and the young mothers, gray with tiredness. Nell never rushed a single one of them.
I'll be taking up your table again, I suppose. You'll be wanting rid of me.
Mr. Tregarth, you'd be doing me a kindness keeping me company. Tell me about your Edith. You said she grew roses.
And the old man's whole face changed, the way a room changes when someone finally opens the curtains. Later, watching him leave a little straighter than he had come in, Chloe said quietly,
You do that for all of them. You just listen.
When Richard left, do you know what I missed most? Not him. Being seen. Having one person in the world notice whether I'd had a good day.
She looked around the warm little room.
Half the world is starving for exactly that, and it's the cheapest thing we serve.
It never once showed up in the accounts, but it was, Nell knew, the truest thing the Bluebird did. Sam kept finding reasons to come by. a shelf that needed leveling, a hinge, a door that stuck. Nell noticed and said nothing, and always had a slice of cake ready. One quiet evening after closing, he lingered over his tea longer than any hinge could explain.
The woman in the photograph, in your workshop.
Maggie, my wife. Boat went over in a squall 8 years back. I built that boat.
His jaw tightened.
I've built 100 since. Never sailed one again.
Nell said nothing clumsy. She simply moved her chair a little closer and let the silence be kind.
I'm so sorry, Sam.
Folk kept telling me to move on, as if she were a house I could walk out of. I got good at being alone, told myself I preferred it.
He looked up, and for a moment the guard was gone.
And then some fool woman bought the Bluebird and started making me tea, and I find I'm less good at it than I was.
It was the most he had ever said. Nell's heart turned over, slow and warm.
Well, you know where the tea is.
Sam took to walking her home after closing, though the flat was directly above the cafe and required no walking at all. Neither of them mentioned the absurdity of it. He would wait while she locked up, and then they would take the long way, along the harbor wall, past the sleeping boats, out to where the sea breathed against the stones, and the lighthouse turned its slow, patient light over the water. One warm evening they sat at the end of the jetty, not quite touching, and talked in the easy way that only comes late and by water.
Maggie and I never had children. Always thought there'd be time. There's a lesson in that I've spent 8 years refusing to learn.
Which is?
That someday is a coward's word. You pour the whole of your living into it. And then one day, the boat goes over. And someday, never comes.
He turned to her.
I stopped saying it the day you marched into my yard and told me I was the only man alive who could save your leaking wreck of a cafe.
I was terrified, you know. I only put on a brave face.
I know. It's my favorite thing about you. Frightened to death, and you do it anyway. Maggie was like that.
Quietly.
I didn't think I'd feel that twice in one life.
For a moment neither of them spoke. The lighthouse swept over them. Once, twice. Then Nell reached out in the dark and took his weathered hand, and he let her, and they sat like that a long while. Two people who had been sure the water of their lives had gone still, feeling the tide begin, quietly, to turn. She should have known that a life beginning to bloom would bring the past sniffing back. On a bright Saturday, the bell jangled, and Eleanor looked up into the face of her ex-husband.
Nell, look at you. Look at this place. It's wonderful. I always said you had it in you.
He had never once said that.
Richard, what are you doing here?
Things with, well, it didn't work out. I've done a lot of thinking about us, about what we had. 32 years, Nell, that doesn't just vanish.
The salesman's smile.
I've been a fool. I'd like to come home, wherever home is now.
There it was. She looked at him, the good coat, the practiced warmth, the man who had made her feel small. For so long she'd mistaken it for the size she was, and waited to feel the old pull. To her astonishment, it didn't come.
You didn't want me, Richard. You wanted someone to iron your shirts and admire you and disappear. That was never the same as wanting me.
Richard's smile flickered.
Don't be dramatic. I'm offering you your life back. Do you really want to grow old alone playing shopkeeper in some damp little town at your age?
And there it was. At your age, the same coin Vincent Cole had spent, the same coin the whole world seemed to keep pressing into the hands of women over 50, as if it were a debt. Nell stood up. She was not shaking. She noticed that, distantly, with pride.
I'm not growing old alone, Richard. I've got Winnie and Chloe and Max and a whole street of people whose names I know. I've got Sam. I've got the sea outside my window every morning. And I've got myself back, which, it turns out, I'd been missing far longer than I ever missed you.
She walked to the door and opened it. The bell sang.
Thank you for coming. The tea's on the house, but you should go home. This one's mine.
He went. She watched his good coat disappear down the cobbles and felt, not triumph exactly, but something better. The quiet, settled peace of a woman who had finally stopped auditioning for her own life. Katie arrived that evening unannounced, having driven 4 hours on the strength of a worried phone call from a mother who'd sounded, for once, entirely fine. She stood in the doorway of the Bluebird as the last golden light came off the water, taking in the flowers, the warm walls, the regulars calling good night, her mother laughing with an old man about his grandchildren.
You look different.
Do I?
You look like... I don't remember you ever looking like this. Happy. Like it's yours.
Voice breaking.
I was so scared, Mum. I thought you were falling apart. I didn't realize you were putting yourself back together.
Nell crossed the room and held her daughter, and over Katie's shoulder she saw the cafe she'd built out of grief and stubbornness and second chances.
I know, love. I was scared too. Being scared and doing it anyway, turns out that's the whole trick.
Right. Well, if you're going to do this insane thing, you're not doing it with that ancient till. Let me at your books. I didn't do a business degree for nothing.
And just like that, mother and daughter were, for the first time in years, on the same side. The peace did not last. One morning, a stark white notice appeared, cable tied to the lamppost outside the Bluebird, an application by Coal Coastal Developments to demolish the eastern end of Harbor Street and build seafront apartments. A date was set for the council to decide, 6 weeks away. The street gathered on the cobbles to read it, a huddle of frightened faces.
That's it then. Once the council waves it through, we're done. He's got the money and the lawyers. What have we got?
A murmur of hopelessness went round. Nell felt it pulling at her too, the old undertow. Who was she to fight a man like Cole? A shopkeeper, a woman starting over, nobody important. But then Max, Chloe's little boy, tugged her sleeve and asked if the seagulls would have to move house, and something in Nell simply refused.
We've got each other. We've got a street full of people who actually live here. He sees a spreadsheet. We see our home.
Steadier.
6 weeks is not nothing. I'm not handing him this street without a fight. Who's with me?
There was a silence, and then Winnie put her small hand up, and then Chloe, and then, slowly, one by one, the others. They had barely begun to organize when the sky turned against them. A freak summer storm rolled in off the Atlantic, black and howling, and battered Port Marin for 2 days. On the second night, Nell woke to a sound no cafe owner ever wants to hear. Water. She stumbled downstairs to find the storm had torn part of the newly mended roof away, and rain was pouring through the ceiling, streaming down the robin's egg walls, pooling black across the floor she had sanded with her own raw hands. She stood in the doorway in her nightdress and watched months of work dissolve, and something inside her finally buckled.
I can't do this. What was I thinking?
For the first time since she'd arrived, she let herself sink down onto the wet stairs and sob. For the roof, for the money she didn't have to fix it, for the divorce, for the 32 folded up years, for the sheer exhausting terror of building a life alone at 58. It all came out at once in the dark, with the rain coming in. She had leapt, and the ground, it seemed, was rushing up to meet her after all. That is how Winnie found her at dawn, soaked, spent, sitting on the stairs of her flooded dream. The old woman didn't gasp or fuss. She simply took off her raincoat, sat down on the wet step beside Nell, and put a small, warm arm around her.
There now, let it come. I cried on these very cobbles the year I lost my Bert. Thought the world had ended.
The roof's gone, Winnie. The money's gone. Maybe Katie was right. Maybe Cole was right. Maybe I'm just a foolish old woman who...
Now you stop that. Stop it.
Gentler, taking Nell's chin like a child's.
Listen to me. A storm is not a verdict. It's just weather, love. It knocks things down so you find out what you're really made of putting them back up.
She looked around at the wreck, entirely unafraid.
You didn't build this place because it was easy. You built it because you'd finally remembered you were somebody. A hole in the roof doesn't change that. Now.
She stood, brisk.
Kettle, camp, stove. We'll cry over tea like civilized women and then we'll get to work. You are not alone, Eleanor. Not anymore. Get that through your head.
By mid-morning, the word had gone round, and Harbor Street came to the Bluebird, not to gawk, but with buckets, ladders, and tarpaulins. And at the head of them, already up on the roof, before Nell could argue, was Sam.
Sam, I can't pay you for this. I can't pay anyone. The money's...
Did I ask you for money?
A pause. He looked down at her, rain in his gray hair.
You're not the only one who forgot how to let people help, you know. Get up here and pass me that baton.
So she climbed her own roof beside him, and together, soaked and swearing and laughing at the sheer madness of it, they patched the wound in the Bluebird while the town worked below. At noon they sat on the ridge, feet dangling, sharing a flask, the whole shining harbor spread beneath them.
I built boats to keep from feeling anything. 8 years.
He turned to her.
You've gone and undone all that good work, Nell Hartley. I don't much mind.
And there on the roof, with the town below and the sea beyond, he kissed her, a slow, weathered, careful kiss, to people who had thought that part of life was behind them, finding out it wasn't. The roof held, and something in Nell, patched and stronger, held too. If the town could rally like that for one flooded cafe, she thought, then Cole had badly misjudged what he was up against. That night, poring over old photographs Arthur had dug out of his cellar, Katie made a discovery.
Mom, look at this. The Bluebird. During the war.
In the faded photograph, the Bluebird's window bore different lettering. It had been the tea room where the Port Marin lifeboat crew gathered before every launch. The last warm room dozens of rescued sailors had seen before the storm, and the first they saw after. Arthur's shop had made the lamps. The whole eastern end of the street had a history stitched into the town's survival.
He wants to knock down history and sell the view back to us as luxury.
She looked up.
So we remind everyone what it is he's really tearing down. We don't just fight the plans. We throw this street the biggest party it's ever seen, and we invite the whole county and the newspapers to come and fall in love with it right before the vote.
A Harbor Street Festival.
A Harbor Street Festival.
To fight for Harbor Street, Nell first had to understand it, so she spent an evening in the back of Arthur's shop while the old man opened boxes he had not touched in years. Out came sepia photographs, a brass lifeboat lamp wrapped in cloth, a ledger of names going back a century.
That's the crew, 1953. My grandfather made the lamps that brought them home in the dark. Your Bluebird, that was the muster room. The wives waited there, kettle on, all night sometimes, watching the water.
His voice caught.
Some came home, some didn't. But that room held all of it, every launch, every prayer, every homecoming.
Nell held the old lamp carefully, feeling the weight of all those nights in it.
And Cole wants to knock it flat and sell the sea view back to strangers.
Aye, and the worst of it, I nearly let him. I was so tired, Nell. I thought, what's the point? There's no one left who remembers, no one left who cares.
Nell set the lamp down and took the old man's trembling hands in both of hers.
I care, and that whole street out there is about to care. You've been guarding all of this on your own, thinking nobody was coming.
She smiled.
Well, somebody came. We're going to remind this entire town what it is standing on, and we're going to do it with a party they will never forget.
For the first time in a year, Arthur Penhale straightened his stooped back, and something that had gone out in him long ago flickered cautiously back to life. The next 3 weeks turned Harbor Street into a hive, and the woman at the center of it, clipboard in hand, was a woman nobody, least of all herself, would have recognized 8 months before. Nell coordinated everyone. Chloe, blossoming by the day, took charge of the food stalls and discovered she was brilliant at it. Katie built a website overnight, started a petition, and set up a community crowdfunder to buy Arthur's building for the street itself. Sam and his boatyard lads built bunning-strung stalls along the cobbles. Winnie mustered every gardener in 3 parishes to make the street riot with flowers.
Nell, I rang the radio station, actually rang them, and they said yes, they'll come. I did that.
Of course you did. Look at you. Do you see now what I saw the day you walked in late with a biscuit-covered boy?
A bit. I'm starting to.
Arthur, who had not smiled in a year, put a fresh coat of paint on his old shop front and stood back looking 10 years younger.
Feels like the old days. Feels like the streets got a pulse again.
It did, and its heartbeat, though she'd never have said so, was the Bluebird. 2 days before the festival, Nell found Chloe in the cafe yard at closing, coat on, bag packed, tears on her face.
I can't run the food stalls, I can't. There'll be thousands of people and the radio and the papers and I'll get it wrong and let everyone down. You should give it to someone who actually knows what they're doing.
Nell set down her cloth, came and stood in front of her, and spoke very steadily.
Do you know what I just heard? I heard a woman being told she isn't enough, and do you know who was telling her?
Gently.
You were. Only you. That voice isn't the truth, love. It's an old habit wearing your own voice to slip past the guard.
But what if I fail?
Then you'll fail while trying something magnificent surrounded by people who will catch you? That isn't failing, that's living. I spent 32 years so frightened of getting it wrong that I never once found out what I could get right.
Softer.
Don't wait as long as I did, Chloe. You are so much more than you have ever been told. Let me be the one who's right about you.
For a long moment, Chloe stood trembling on the very edge of the cliff Nell had once stood on, in an empty house with pale squares on the wall. And then slowly, she set down her bag.
The chocolate ones need longer in the oven than the recipe says. I worked that out myself.
There's my festival manager.
Vincent Cole, watching his tidy acquisition turn into a public love affair, stopped smiling. He came to the Bluebird one last time, and this time the syrup was gone.
This is very charming, Mrs. Hartley. Bunting, a petition, a little newspaper story, but I have contracts and lawyers and 3 counsellors who understand progress. You have scones.
He leaned in.
I could make this easier for you. A generous sum, quietly today. Or I can make the next few years of your little cafe very difficult. Health inspections, noise complaints, reviews. I'm a patient man, but I always win. Always.
For a moment the old fear reached for her. Then Nell thought of the roof and the town on her stairs, and Winnie's small, fierce arm, and she looked Vincent Cole full in his pale eyes and did not blink.
You know, Mr. Cole, you keep saying, at your age, and a woman like you, and a little cafe, as though those were insults. But I've been underestimated by better men than you for 32 years. It's rather freeing, actually. It means you never see me coming.
She opened the door.
We'll settle this at the council meeting, in public, where you can't do it quietly.
Cole left. This time he did not leave a card. The festival was set for the Saturday before the council's vote. On the Friday night, alone in the flat above the Bluebird, Nell couldn't sleep. She stood at the little window over the darkened harbor, the same window where 8 months ago she had first felt like a person again, and let herself be afraid. So much rode on tomorrow. If the weather turned, if no one came, if the papers stayed home, Cole would win, and Arthur would lose his family's shop, and the street would be rubble by spring. And it would be in part because a foolish woman had made everyone hope. A soft knock. Sam with 2 mugs of cocoa and a carpenter's certainty.
Couldn't sleep either. Thought as much.
He handed her a mug, stood beside her at the glass.
Whatever happens tomorrow, Nell, you already won. 8 months ago, this street was dying and half these folk didn't know each other's names. You did that, not the festival, you.
And if it's not enough?
Then we'll have loved it properly while it lasted. That's not nothing. That's most of it, actually.
They stood together a long time, and at last she slept. Saturday came gray. Nell was up before 5, and her heart sank at the low cloud brooding over the harbor. She stood on the cobbles among the half-dressed stalls and the limp bunting and felt the old terror climb her throat. Chloe arrived, took one look at the sky and voiced it.
Nobody comes to a seaside festival in the rain. Nell, what if it's empty?
For a moment, Nell had no brave answer. Then Winnie appeared, already pinning up flowers as though the weather were a personal insult she intended to ignore.
None of your nonsense today, thank you.
To Nell, winking.
It'll clear. It always clears when it matters. And if it doesn't, we'll dance in our Macs and put that in the paper too.
Nell laughed despite herself and squared her shoulders and got to work. They hung the last of the bunting. They fired up the urns. They set out 300 of Chloe's cakes and prayed. And at 9 o'clock, as if Winnie had ordered it personally, the cloud broke. A shaft of gold fell across the wet cobbles, then another, and the whole harbor began to steam and shine. By 9:30, the first cars were arriving. By 10, there was nowhere left to park in Port Marin. They came in their hundreds and then their thousands. Families, day trippers, old sailors, a local news van, a reporter with a notebook, a photographer who kept stopping to catch the light on the flower-drenched cobbles. Harbor Street had never looked so beautiful or so alive. Bunting snapped in the sea breeze. Sam's lads gave boat-building demonstrations. Arthur, in a clean shop coat, told wide-eyed children how his family's lamps had guided the lifeboat home. Winnie's flowers spilled everywhere, and at the warm heart of it all stood the Bluebird, doors flung wide, Nell and Chloe pouring tea until their arms ached, turning no one away. Katie moved through the crowd with a tablet, and every so often she caught her mother's eye across the sea of people and mouthed the rising number on the community crowdfunder.
Mum, we've passed halfway. People are they're giving. Strangers.
Because they can see it now. They can see it's worth saving.
A reporter cornered her by the counter and asked why one woman had taken on a property developer over a row of old shops.
Because a town isn't a spreadsheet. It's the people who know your name. You can't build that, but you can knock it down. And I decided I wasn't going to let anyone.
For one heart-stopping hour, it nearly went wrong. In the crush of the crowd, little Max slipped away from the food stall, and Chloe's happy morning collapsed into every mother's nightmare. Word went round in seconds, and the festival's joy turned, for a moment, to fear, until the whole street, the whole idea of it, proved itself, because nobody stood by. Sam organized the boatyard lads into search parties. Winnie planted herself at the harbor steps so no child could reach the water. Arthur checked every shop. Strangers joined in without being asked. And it was Nell who found him, solemn and entirely unbothered, sitting behind the Bluebird's counter, feeding scone crumbs to a very lucky seagull he'd let in through the back.
Oh, you monster, you beautiful monster!
When she carried him out to Chloe, the young woman fell on them both, sobbing.
I turned my back for 1 second. I can't. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Huh?
That's what a street is for, my girl. That's the whole point of the thing. Not one of us stood still.
And the reporter wrote that down too. The following Thursday, the town hall was fuller than anyone could remember. Word of the festival and the newspaper's warm two-page spread and the crowdfunder that had wildly overshot its goal had done its work. People who had never been to a planning meeting in their lives stood along the walls. Vincent Cole arrived with 2 lawyers and the confidence of a man who had done this 100 times. He spoke of investment, of jobs, of progress, of the future. Then it was Nell's turn. 8 months ago, she could not have stood in front of 3 people, let alone 300. She walked to the front and her hands did not shake.
Mr. Cole keeps calling this progress, but he doesn't live here. He won't know your names. He'll take the last warm room the lifeboat crews ever gathered in and sell it back to us as a view.
She turned to the room.
This street isn't dying. It's the most alive it's been in 20 years. You've all seen it. We don't need saving by a developer. We just needed to remember we were worth saving. And we've raised the money to buy Arthur's building ourselves, for the town, in trust, forever.
The room erupted, and the councillors who could count votes and read a room and see the news cameras at the back exchanged a long look. They rejected Cole's application. The eastern end of Harbor Street would stand. The community's offer for Arthur's shop was accepted, to be held in trust as a working heritage shop, with Arthur teaching whoever came after. The cheer that went up shook the old hall's windows. Vincent Cole gathered his papers with a thin, tight smile. On his way out, he paused by Nell, the only still point in the roaring room.
You understand this is unusual. People like you don't usually win.
That's the thing, Mr. Cole. I stopped being people like you expected about 8 months ago. You should try it. It's never too late.
He almost smiled. Then he was gone, and the silver car purred away down the coast road for the last time. And Harbor Street belonged to the people who lived on it. Outside in the summer dusk, the whole town spilled onto the cobbles, and someone started playing a fiddle, and the celebration went on long into the warm and starry night. A week after the vote, Sam asked Nell to come down to the boatyard. There, on the slipway, sat a small, beautiful sailing boat, freshly painted, that she had watched him work on for months without ever asking about. On the bow, in careful, hand-painted letters, was a name, Bluebird.
First one I've built to sail in 8 years. First one I've wanted to.
He cleared his throat.
Reckoned it was time I stopped keeping myself on dry land. Wondered if you'd come out on the water with me. Not just today. Regular.
He gave up on words.
You know what I mean, woman.
I know exactly what you mean.
They sailed out past the harbor wall into the gold of the evening. 2 people who had both been quite certain that love and adventure were things that happened to other, younger lives. The little Bluebird cut cleanly through the swell. Behind them, the town glowed. Ahead, the open sea.
I used to think my life was mostly behind me. Turns out I was only halfway up the hill.
Sundays became sacred. The cafe closed to the public and opened instead to the strange, patched-together family that the year had quietly assembled around Eleanor Hartley. There was Sam carving the roast because his hands were the steadiest. There was Winnie holding court at the head of the table with a flower behind her ear. There was Chloe, easy now in her own skin, and Max under the table feeding an ever-hopeful dog. There was Arthur, not eating alone on a Sunday for the first time in a decade. And there was Katie, up from the city more weekends than not, arguing with her mother about nothing, which is the truest sign of love there is.
Mum, you cannot give away free cake to every sad-looking stranger. It's a business.
It's why the business works, dear. Do keep up.
Nell sat in the middle of it all. Not the head of the table, the middle, exactly where she liked to be, and looked around at the faces and had to blink hard for a moment.
All right.
A year ago, I ate my dinner standing at a stranger's kitchen counter feeling like a ghost. And now look.
She gestured at the noise, the warmth, the whole glowing room.
I didn't just build a cafe, Sam. I built a family out of people who'd all been left over, myself included.
He squeezed her hand under the table. Outside, the gulls wheeled over a harbor, turning gold, and inside, the Bluebird was full of the best sound in the world. People who belonged to each other, being loud about it. By the year's turn, the Bluebird was busy enough to need a manager, and Nell had known for months who it would be. She found Chloe wiping tables and simply handed her a set of keys.
What are these?
Keys to the Bluebird. I'm making you manager. You've earned it 3 times over. I want to take Wednesdays off and go sailing with a grumpy carpenter, and I need someone I trust running my cafe.
Nell, I can't. I left school at 16. I'm not. People like me don't.
Now, you stop that. I have watched you ring radio stations and run a festival and raise a wonderful boy on nothing but grit and love. Don't you dare tell me what people like you can't do. I won't have it in my cafe.
Chloe looked at the keys in her hand for a long moment. Then she laughed and cried and pinned them to her apron like a medal.
Right. Then Wednesdays are mine, and I'm redoing that terrible till system.
There she is.
One gray afternoon, a letter came, in Richard's familiar hand. Nell made a pot of tea before she opened it, and found she could read it now with nothing more than a mild, distant fondness. He was well, he wrote. He'd seen the newspaper story, Local Woman Saves Historic Street, and had felt, he admitted, a little ashamed of himself. He was glad she was happy. He hoped one day they might be friends. Nell sat with it a while watching the boats. Then she wrote back briefly and kindly, wished him well, and meant it. She wasn't angry anymore. Anger she'd found was a weight you only carried until you set it down.
Do you know, I spent so long being frightened he'd leave, and it turned out to be the making of me.
Aye, the things we're most afeared of losing. Sometimes they're the very doors we're too scared to walk through ourselves.
She patted Nell's hand.
You walked through, love. That's the whole of it.
On a soft evening near the end of that first year, Winnie and Nell sat outside the flower stall in 2 old chairs, watching the light go down over the water, saying the comfortable nothings of true friends.
You know, when you first turned up, frightened rabbit of a thing in that gray coat, I told you you had the look. Do you remember?
Frightened to death and doing it anyway.
I've watched this street 80 years, love. Watched it fill and empty. And I'll tell you the one thing I know that nobody believes till it's nearly too late.
She turned, and her old face was fierce and tender.
It's never the young ones who save a place. They've too much ahead of them to sit still. It's the ones the world's written off. The widows, the left behind, the too old to bother. They're the ones with nothing left to lose but their fear. And heaven help anyone who stands between a woman like that and her second chance.
Nell reached over and took her small, papery hand.
You saved me, you know, that first morning. Daffodils and all.
No, dear. I only handed you the flowers. You did the rest.
A beat softer.
I'm glad I lived to see it. An old woman doesn't always get to watch the next one come good. It's the finest thing there is.
And the 2 of them sat on, hand in hand, as the lighthouse woke and the first stars came out over Harbor Street, and neither of them said another word, because none was needed. A year to the day after Eleanor Nell Hartley first walked the cobbles of Harbor Street, terrified and alone, she stood in the doorway of the Bluebird and watched her life go by. Inside, Chloe laughed with a customer while Max did his homework in the corner. Winnie's flowers blazed at the door. Down the street, Arthur showed a young apprentice how to work the brass lamps. Katie, up for the weekend, argued happily with her mother about spreadsheets. And Sam leaned in the doorway of his boatyard, lifted a hand, and smiled the slow smile he saved only for her. She was 59 now. There was more silver in her hair and more lines by her eyes, and she had never once in her whole careful life before this felt so completely herself. The girl in the old photograph, salt in her hair, laughing on the harbor wall, had not been lost after all. She had only been waiting, folded up in a drawer, for a frightened woman to be brave enough to let her out.
There you are. I wondered where you'd got to.
And so, my dear friend, that is the story of the Bluebird on Harbor Street. But I think you know it was never really about a cafe. If there's one small thing to carry away from Nell, let it be this. It is never too late to become yourself. Not at 50, not at 60, not at 80. The years behind you were not the whole story. They were only the first half. The fear you feel at the edge of something new isn't a sign to turn back. It's a sign you're finally facing the right direction. So do the frightening thing, make the call, open the door, and let yourself begin again. Somewhere tonight, on a curving street above a small stone harbor, the lights of a little blue cafe are glowing warm against the dark, and the people inside know each other's names. And a woman who was once quite sure her best days were behind her is wiping down the counter, humming, really humming, while a gray-haired man waits at the door to walk her home along the water. Thank you for spending this time with me. If Nell's story warmed your heart, share it with a woman who needs to remember that she too is not finished. Take good care of yourself this week. Be a little brave. And remember, your best chapter may still be the one you haven't written. Good night, my dear friend. And from all of us on Harbor Street, it is never, ever too late.